Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to our look ahead to what's in the headlines for Al-Hakam, Al-Fazl, and this week we will also be discussing the review of religions. To kickstart, we have Sabahat Saab from the Review of Religions. So Sabahat Saab, what can we expect in this edition of the review?
Amongst other things, Naman Saib, I think the hallmark of this particular edition is inspired by Sayyidina Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, the fifth, may Allah be his helper. While we wanted to do an edition on the signs of the promised Messiah والسلام, as it was March, the entire team's attention was focused upon the earth. But as it turns out, and as it always is, the vision of beloved Khalifatul Masih was fixed upon the heavens. So despite our research, when we presented it to beloved Huzur Anwar, may Allah be pleased with him, he said, what about Zus Sinin, the comet that appeared in the time of the promised Messiah ﷺ? He instructed us to look into the scientific basis, the records, what they have to say about this comet. To our astonishment, when we started looking at this, we found that this comet is so absolutely distinctive amongst the comets, even in the last 1,000 years. John Bortle, who did an entire thesis on this comet, writes that this is arguably the most significant and brilliant comet of the last 1,000 years. Then another scientist at Arizona State University, he corroborates this view. And he says that this is incontrovertibly the greatest, or brightest rather, comet of the last 1,000 years.
So what can your readership expect to read in this edition?
Well, what you can definitely expect is new discoveries in the way of what the observatories in 1882 all over the world saw about this comet. What's unique is that you will be able to find academic sources that from all over the globe. And because we live in an era where academia is at the forefront, you will find a methodological and hermeneutically sound line and thread of argument proving that the comet of 1882 is an incontrovertible sign proving the truthfulness of the promised Messiah ﷺ.
That's great. So this is basically the feature article in this edition of the Review of Religions, and it's available right now to subscribers. And the digital edition will be obviously made shortly on the reviewofreligions.org. Now, moving on to Al-Hakam, and it's a very interesting headline this time, as always. So, yes. Fatin, if you can bring us in.
This week we have Muslims must recover their lost glory. So, on the front page of this week's newspaper of Al-Hakam, there's two stories actually. There's one about the notion that religion is decreasing amongst people and people are not believing in religion anymore, but that's equally objectable because the entertainment industry are actually doing more and more films about religion and the use of religion. Secondly, it's the 150th anniversary of the periodic table, and in this we talk about how initially it was, Western scientific thought was on the shoulders of Muslim scientific thought, and we talk about how Muslims have actually lost that passion and that scientific discovery which it once had, and we actually prompt the readers to follow the instructions of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, may God Almighty be his helper, and pursue areas of research and scientific development. And apart from that, of course, there's many other interesting articles as well. For example, there's one speech of Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu, which he delivered in the Martin Historical Society in Lahore. And that talks about why there was so much separation within the Muslim Ummah after the Khulafai Rashidin.
That's of course the outset of dissension in Islam, a very important and a very remarkable speech of Hazrat Muslim Maud. Now finally, before we speak about the upcoming Peace Symposium, if we just briefly touch on Al-Fazl, and of course recently there was some disorder in Bangladesh, and this has been covered in this edition of Al-Fazl. So last week Al-Fazl was still continuing to cover the Muslim World Special Edition. And this week we can see the continuation of Hazrat Muslim World's article about Christianity, which has actually never been published before. But the remarkable thing is on page 4, which is basically a report of the persecution of Ahmadis in Bangladesh. And this is something that our readers can read up on when Al-Fazl and Al-Hakam are released tomorrow. Now, the Peace Symposium. What is Al-Hakam, I believe, saying about that? It's giving a build-up report.
So, of course, this is something which happens every year, and sometimes it happens more than twice a year. And it's a very highlighted event in the course of the annual calendar. It's where Hazur addresses many MPs, academics, journalists, and he talks about his solutions to the great disorders of the world right now. This is something which Al-Hakam is speaking about as well. We're talking about what other people are presenting in terms of their solutions. But of course, the key moment in our history right now is listening to what Hazrat Khalifa Masih Al-Khamis, may God Almighty be his helper, is saying about the disorders in the world and what are his solutions. And of course, we have to spread whatever Hazur is saying amongst people so that, essentially the world is saved from catastrophe. And that catastrophe, of course, Hazur has been saying that it could be a world war.
That's exactly right. And all of these themes our readers can pick up on in each of these periodicals, which we very much recommend that everyone obtains from alhakam.org, alfazl.org, and it's the reviewofreligions.org, I believe. That's it for today. Be sure to obtain these newspapers when they're released on Friday. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.